Kevin Kreuger wins the Limitless event with Doomtomb, so here we are to make a profile. Welcome back, everyone, to more from the Sableyes. I'm Mitch, and today we're going to be taking a look at Doomtomb. That's Spiritomb with that Yveltal-GX that just won the Limitless Open, I guess it's called. I can't remember exactly what it's called. That's fine. Someone who'll know exactly what it's called is Jordan Palmer, who's going to be with me in this video. But just before we take a look at the list and talk to him, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Only about 30% of people who watch our content are subscribed. It only takes a second, it's free, and you can always unsubscribe if you would like. But hey, without further ado, I'll introduce Jordan and jump into the lists. Hello, Jordan. How are we doing?
Not too bad, thank you, Mitch.
That's good, mate. Haven't had you on for one of these in a little bit of a while. I'm nervous having you here. We're gonna be talking about building Spiritomb and this Doom count kind of list. It's an interesting way to play Spiritomb, but definitely one that can be successful. It's obviously all based around this Spiritomb with building Spite and Anguish Cry. We've seen it with Beasts. We've seen it with ADP, and now we're seeing it with Yveltal. How do you feel about Spiritomb?
It's actually pretty fitting, I'd say, that Spiritomb went on to win the Limitless Invitational, because Spiritomb's kind of had a bit of a story arc over these qualifiers. I competed in all of the qualifiers, and it placed very well. Ross Corfin placed, I believe it was top 4 in the very first of these qualifiers with the ADP Spiritomb build, and I actually went on to play a list very similar to that in the second one, and then it was in the third and fourth ones with Rebel Clash, where we were introduced to the new Dragapult VMAX archetype, which has a very interesting matchup with Spiritomb, where we started to see the Beast versions, and now finally onto this final build that plays the Yveltal-GX. Seems like it's the final part of this deck story arc, and it worked out pretty well for it, because it was actually a mirror match in the finals of this tournament.
It certainly was. So both players ending up in the finals with this sort of list. I know that Luke from Celio's network played the Cryogonal, but this one doesn't. And it's all based around, firstly, that Spiritomb, and then you've also got Doomtomb from Yveltal. Now, you've got a couple of ways that you can set that particular attack up. Firstly, we can just attack with a Buzzwole for 30 damage, and then use a Zigzagoon, which we have access to. There's a whole bunch of other ways we can do it. Mew could be an option. But you know, there's plenty of little finicky ways we can set that Yveltal-GX up to Doomtomb-GX, and once we do that, we can pretty much guarantee that we're going to take ourselves 2 or 3 prizes. So that's pretty solid.
Yeah, it's basically a once per game guaranteed 1-hit KO if you're able to set it up. On top of the ways you just mentioned, there's also the Shrine of Punishments, which we'll talk about a bit later, which can place damage counts on GX Pokemon. You can potentially time that a bit correctly to enter your turn when your opponent has 4 damage counters on them. And of course, you've also got Spiritomb itself, the main attacker of the deck, with just 1 damage counter on it. It does exactly 40 damage, and if you can't manage to get 1 damage counter on Spiritomb, then you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah, I'd imagine that you're in a bit of trouble from there, because you should probably be able to manage it. We'll take a look at the rest of the Pokemon here, not in too much detail, because we don't have a huge amount of time, but we've got 4 Jirachi and 1 Dedenne, which has become a very consistent and regular kind of consistency engine in decks at the moment. We're seeing less Dedennes moving forward because of the prevalence of Research and Marnie. This list plays 4 of both. And we've also got Buzzwole in the deck. We did mention it slightly before. Sledgehammer does 30 plus 90 if your opponent has exactly 4 prize cards remaining, and 120 damage will knock out a Pikarom, which is another one of those decks that's seeing a lot of play at the moment. So Buzzwole could potentially be a very, very strong option.
Yeah, Pikarom definitely one of the decks that's seen the most play over the entire period of these Limitless Qualifier events, so definitely a strong inclusion. It does quite a few good things. Obviously, the Sledgehammer knocking out Pikaroms and pretty much every card in that deck except for Raichu, but even then, you can probably get there using other things like the Zigzagoon and the Shrine of Punishment to get the knockout on the Raichu. It also just, my favorite thing about it is it just acts as a 5th Spiritomb sword. You have to use it on the exact turn that it's good, but it doesn't require setup to get to its maximum amount of damage. You just get a Buzzwole, get an energy, doing 120 damage, and allows you to save your Spiritombs or maybe build your Spiritombs up on the bench to be used in more opportune moments.
Yeah, exactly. Sledgehammer is a very strong attack, and it has been for a couple of years. It'll actually be a little bit sad to see this one go, Jordan. It's gonna be disappearing pretty soon, but that's okay. Just as a little sneaky little preview, and I haven't even told you about this, Jordan, but we're considering doing a few old format decks in the next few weeks once tournaments kind of ease up and we run out of content, because it's coming up pretty soon. We're going to be running out of content, and we're probably going to look at a deck that features Buzzwole, so we'll see how we go with that, Jordan. I'm sure you'll be excited, but before we talk too much about the Buzzwole, which is a one-of card in the 60-card deck, we'll talk about some more of the Pokemon. Jynx is obviously a very important card. We've got 2 of them in this list, and Ominous Posture is one of those abilities that is very, very niche. It's very useful in some decks, and this is one of them. We can move 1 damage counter from one of our Pokemon to another. Means that we can potentially power up Spiritomb that little bit quicker, and we can get 3 or 4 damage counters on it. Before, we wouldn't have been able to get to those extra damage counters, but now we can get 3 in the first turn, start attacking, which is pretty solid. You can get as high as 5 if you get very, very lucky, which is obviously going to be good because Spiritomb's going to be able to do heaps of damage.
Yeah, I like how you said that it's a card that's used in very few decks, when, honestly, when you look at what the card does, it feels like it's almost built specifically to be played with Spiritomb. I mean, it was played in Malamar decks slightly in the past, but that's besides the point. As you said, this card obviously has very good synergy with that Spiritomb being able to power it up even quicker than you'd usually be able to. But now that we've got access to the brand new Scoop Up Net, you can potentially Scoop Up Net Jynx or Spiritomb, get multiple uses out of their ability per turn, and that could be another way to potentially almost cheat and have a third access to Jynx where usually you wouldn't have access to that.
Yeah, exactly. So you could do a lot with it, but hey, we'll try and just use it normally for the moment. We won't go too crazy. There's a couple of other Psychic Pokemon in this list that are very niche and useful. We've got Dimension Breach Giratina, which has suddenly come to the forefront of lots of decks, discarding Special Energy now that there's a ton of them. There's Speed Lightning, there's Horror Psychic, Twin Energy's also around, so we can get rid of those. We also have Mew. We spoke about Pikarom being a good deck in the format at the moment. Not only does Buzzwole help against that, but Mew will stop your opponent from using Tagbolt-GX for multiple prizes, which can kind of slow this deck down, especially if you've got a Dedenne or an Oricorio-GX on the bench. Dance of Tribute is an option. And we also have 1 copy of Mind Report Mewtwo to be able to put those supporters back on top. One of the ones we're probably going to want to use is Boss's Orders. That one, if we can get it onto the top of the deck, maybe draw into it with an Oricorio, use Jirachi, then we can gust up something that we can knock out for free and move on from there. The best thing is Spiritomb's going to be able to very easily knock out things like Dedenne because of this Hustle Belt down here. Sorry, I've talked about a whole bunch of different cards there, but it is important to talk about them in combination. So that Hustle Belt is going to be pretty good. We can boss and take a knockout on Dedenne with 3 damage counters for 160 damage.
Yeah, it's really good. The max on the Spiritomb with 3 damage counters plus a Hustle Belt for 160 is actually pretty much the perfect number for this format, I'd argue. It's enough to get a 2-hit KO on pretty much every relevant Pokemon in the format. Gets a 1-hit KO on Dedenne-GX and some of the more annoying cards in the format, such as that. And of course, most importantly, it is exactly enough damage to get that 1-hit KO on the new Dragapult VMAX due to weakness. So that's going to be very good synergy with that Mewtwo to be able to chain Boss's Orders if necessary. And honestly, it's just good to have cards like that in your deck when you're playing the Scoop Up Net engine. You've got access to the Giratina, the Zigzagoon, the Mewtwo, all these really powerful reusable abilities. And that's before we even talk about the ones that are specific to this deck, like the Spiritomb and the Jynx that can potentially be reused as well. So lots of good uses for Scoop Up Net in this deck.
Yeah, Scoop Up Net, I would say at this point, is probably my favourite card out of Rebel Clash. I know it's between that and Boss. Both of these cards are pretty good. But Scoop Up Net definitely has a lot of flexibility. Talking about flexibility, we've got 2 copies of Switch as well, so we can move in and out. When it comes to Pokemon Search, we've got Quick Ball, another pretty good card from Rebel Clash. I mean, sorry, that's not Rebel Clash, that's Sword and Shield. What am I talking about? That's a pretty good card anyway, so we've got 4 copies of that, and our other Pokemon Search is going to be Great Ball. Now, before we were talking about recording this video, Jordan, you and I were sitting talking about the merits of Great Ball versus Pokemon communication. Now, we've got 18 Pokemon in this list, so Pokecom could potentially be good, but what's that? What is that point when Great Ball is useful? Because lots of decks play it, but I still don't know the number.
Yeah, it's very interesting topic of discussion, as we were saying earlier. It's like when you get to like 20 plus Pokemon, then all of a sudden Pokemon communication seems like the obvious better one. When you get to like 16 or below, then both Pokecom and Great Ball both seem kind of average. So maybe the perfect amount of Pokemon to play Great Ball is 18, and that's the amount of Pokemon that this plays. So it seems pretty good here.
It seems pretty solid. We'll just wrap up the rest of the list now. There's not too much more to talk about. We've got Adventure Bag. Obviously, those hustle belts are pretty important to find, but we can find a skateboard with them as well. That'll get our Jirachis out of the active. We also have Lana's Fishing Rod, which will put a Pokemon and a tool card back into the deck for us, so we can reuse one of our 3 hustle belts if we need to. That's pretty strong. We mentioned Boss before, but we also have Great Catcher to bring up GX Pokemon for knockouts, which is pretty solid. And if we can't get those knockouts, then we could potentially use Black Market Prism to stop our opponent from knocking our Dark Pokemon out as well. Black Market is a pretty niche, but probably very useful card. When it works, it's going to pretty much win us a game, I'd imagine. It's very difficult to see people winning against the deck when they can't take any prizes, but it is a stadium, so you do need to be careful. Things like Chaotic Swell will stop it in its tracks, but your opponent could just play down their own stadium anyway and get rid of it.
Yeah, it's certainly not a perfect card. It's not a core part of the deck strategy, but what is a core part of the deck strategy is its prize mapping and its ability to win the prize trade by taking out big GXs, tag teams, and Bs with non-GX Pokemon. Going to make the prize trade definitely in its favor. And Black Market is a way to kind of boost that even more. If your opponent's taking 0 prizes per knockout instead of 1, then you're going to be in a pretty good spot to win the game, even if it only triggers once every couple games. That's still really big.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it's just 1 knockout that you can afford to, like, that you give up, your opponent doesn't take a prize. That's pretty strong. Finally, I mean, we mentioned Shrine of Punishment before, so we've got 2 copies of that. Finally, the energy. We have 4 copies of Rainbow Energy, which is super useful in this deck. We can use it to accelerate our damage counters on the board to get more damage out of Spiritomb. We also have Unit Energy, which is useful on pretty much all of our attackers. It's got the fighting energy so that we can use it with the Buzzwole as well if we have to. And then finally, 1 Aurora Energy, just as an extra kind of unit rainbow type energy that we could potentially use if we need to. Things like Dedenne and Jirachi are maybe options to attack with, which is weird enough, so we could maybe use Aurora there as well. But I think we're probably going to be looking at Rainbow as our main energy attachment. That's going to be the one that's going to get us the most damage with Spiritomb.
Yep, and an interesting point of discussion that you brought up earlier that I didn't really have a good answer to is you suggested the idea of playing a basic Dark Energy instead of the full copy of Aurora. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I can't think of any specific reason why having that extra Rainbow Energy for the Buzzwole is that big a deal. Maybe it's just the safety net of having all of your energy to be usable by Buzzwole. But hey, if you want to have a basic energy in the deck for things like Viridian Forest, then that's perfectly reasonable too.
Yeah, it certainly is. So what we'll do is we'll take this list out onto the ladder. Hopefully we can be as successful with it as it was in the Limitless tournament over the weekend. Obviously, the final was a mirror match, so there's probably going to be a lot of Spiritomb out there. We'll take it out and see how it goes. Alright, so here we go. We've got ourselves a match. We're trying to record this commentary live, so we'll see how we go, Jordan. Sometimes with decks, you record live and you end up recording live 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 times. So hopefully this one is good enough that we can get ourselves a match quickly. And we've got a pretty good start here, starting Jirachi.
Yeah, this is, if there's any deck that we had to record live, this is one that I've got pretty high hopes for. I feel like we're going to be able to show off what the deck does relatively consistently, because I feel like it's a pretty consistent deck, and it's a pretty strong deck. And when you have a strong deck that's consistent, that's usually a pretty good combination.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what we're playing against here. We've got Jirachi and Oranguru on the other side of the field, and playing Autopad, which I'm not sure about. I've not seen that card in a while, Jordan. So they're flipped heads as well, so they're gonna grab something. They've also played down Chaotic Swell, so we'll have to wait and see. But we've got pretty much everything that we need here. We've got an energy, a quick ball. We've got a skateboard so we can get out of the active with this Jirachi. Could potentially be looking at an attack this turn, but it just does depend on what our opponent chooses to, well, I guess what they're playing. Going for another Autopad here, so it's very odd. A third Autopad! Oh my god, what's going on? That's just, guys just got Autopads for days.
Wasn't actually autopad for the next autopad so they get to play all 4 on one turn.
Yeah, play the 4th autopad. No, they're just going for a quick ball.
Oh.
Lame. So they'll probably play this quick ball here, discarding a Metal Energy. So we are probably looking at a Zacian deck, if I had to guess. I think we're looking at combo Zacian. That could be the way that this is going to work, especially with so many autopads. But it could also be... Oh, okay, so it's just ADP. And for some reason they chose to grab the ADP with a quick ball. Obviously no supporter in hand. Oh, I mean, they're going first, so maybe they're just going for Dedenne. Here we go. All right. So that's a card that I've not seen at ADP Zacian yet. Jordan is autopad, and looks like they've got a pretty solid setup because of it.
Yeah, it's pretty spicy. Certainly worked out pretty well for our opponent here, getting both the ADP and getting themselves out of a dead hand with the Dedenne, and they're able to find themselves that Zacian V on the bench to start setting up their hand with Intrepid Sword. So definitely an intimidating start from our opponent. This is probably actually a pretty tough matchup for Spiritomb, knowing that they're going to be able to take only 3 knockouts to win the game. So we're going to have to be pretty aggressive to be able to get this one, I reckon.
Yeah, well, I mean, the best thing for us is that we do have that Buzzwole. So as long as we can gust out that Dedenne at some point, our prize mapping shouldn't be too bad. We've got 3 prizes on the ADP, 2 on the Dedenne, and then 1 on either the Oranguru or the Jirachi. So if they leave the Jirachi in the active, we might be able to get a quick knockout here. You'd think, though, that they would retreat into the ADP. That seems like the safest option for them. But that might not necessarily be the case. So we'll see what happens.
I think regardless of which one of those 2 options they go for, it's pretty good for us, because either way, our game plan involves taking 3 prizes on the ADP and taking 1 prize on either the Jirachi or the Oranguru. So I think it's fine to either get the 1 prize from Jirachi now or get the first hit into the ADP. Seems pretty good as well. Looks like they're going to give us the opportunity to get this Jirachi knockout. We've got a pretty decent hand to go for it. I'd say it's kind of interesting, the order of actions here, because I kind of want to use Stellar Wish to find out if you need to go for the first. So I would say that I'd want to see plays maybe the Great Ball to try and thin to get a support off Jirachi. And if we don't get a support off Jirachi, then we can quick ball for the ADP.
I'm kind of thinking we can grab this. I think we can grab this Giratina here and then quick ball it away, because I don't see us needing it.
Yep. I don't mind that.
And that's going to grab... Well, actually, we should probably Stellar Wish first, because the quick ball could be a Dedenne. So we'll Stellar Wish and see if we get a supporter. We did. So that sounds good to me.
Spiritomb, instead of grabbing a Dedenne-GX.
Exactly.
So I can get rid of that Giratina. We've got the Jynx in hand as well, so if we can get a second Spiritomb into play, we could get that 7 damage Anguish Cry, or we could research away the energy and go for a Rainbow, which is a little risky. So I guess do you want to go for the second Spiritomb, or do you want to go for the Rainbow energy?
It's a bit of a gamble. I think we're more likely to get the second Spiritomb, so I think that's the way that we're going to go here. I think that seems the safest. We'll see what happens. We could have done like a cheeky thing. There we go. We did get the second Spiritomb. It was close, but we did get it.
So, worked out very well for us. Of course, we got another energy anyway, so wouldn't have been punished for not attaching there. But seems pretty good so far.
Fishing rod, right?
Either that or the Mewtwo, because the fishing rod can get the Mewtwo back.
Yeah, that's true. We'll get rid of the Mewtwo.
Pretty good for next turn potentially, so I would like to hold that. The Hustle Belt obviously is pretty strong as well, but yeah, the most important thing is that we're getting this turn 1 knockout on the Spiritomb, because I think it's really important that on the turn that they GX attack, we really just want to half hit that ADP and make sure that after we knock out the ADP, we can just get a quick knockout on either Dedenne-GX or Zacian to win the game. That would be my game plan at least, and I think that's what you were thinking as well.
100%. And we're in a pretty good spot to try and do that. Taking our prize here, we're going to be able to hit nicely into that ADP next turn. We'll have at least 4 damage counters on it and a Hustle Belt, so we'll be able to do a ton of damage, and then we just need to make sure that on the turn when Buzzwole is active that we can attack into that Dedenne. We should be A-okay, but, you know, anything can happen here. They're obviously going to go for their GX attack, but they're in a reasonably good position. They've got everything that they need. It's just a matter of whether or not we can get enough down. There's the 4th autopad, and they flipped heads again. Coin flips for days. 3
out of 4 is pretty good. They were able to get a good 4 and a Cherish Ball off of the first 2, so we'll see what they're able to make use of out of this 4th one. I'd say the scariest card that I would want to not see is like a Mallow and Lana that could really screw over our game plan if they're able to deal the damage from this Spiritomb, but they've got to cut something to fit these autopads in, so
yeah, that's
it'd be pretty tough to fit Mallow and Lana into that list, I imagine.
Well, it might be that they've cut things like Acro Bikes or Crushing Hammers or things like that. They're actually going for Metal Saucer here, so I'm going to grab that Metal Energy out of the discard and put it straight onto the Zacian. Fair enough. I'm going to be prepared to attack here, but they don't actually need Zacian's massive damage. They're going to be able to take most of their knockouts with their ADP. You could even be attacking with Jirachi, actually, which is pretty interesting, because Jirachi is almost definitely going to be in a position to take a knockout. Now, they're Marnieing us away from a lot of good resources here, but we should be fine. Look at that. We've got pretty much everything we need. We just are missing a supporter, which is disappointing.
Yeah. It's a pretty decent hand. It's everything we're going to need for this turn, but it is a little weak for next turn. Oh, we got a mine. That's actually perfect.
This is fantastic.
So I actually kind of want to see the energy attachment go onto the Buzzwole, because we know our opponent's probably going to be going to 4 prizes next turn, and if they want to gust kill the Buzzwole instead of dealing with a damaged Spiritomb in the active, then that doesn't seem like a great strategy for our opponent. And potentially, instead of using the Buzzwole to knock out the Dedenne, we could actually use it to knock out this ADP next turn if it stays in the active, which might work out pretty well for us. So I think we want to try and aim to get the ADP in range of the 120 damage from Buzzwole. So let's try and hit it as hard as we can, basically.
Yeah, I think this is probably fine. I'm going to move the damage off of the Buzzwole because it's not useful there. We'll put it onto the Spiritomb. So we're going to be doing... what's that, 190 damage here, which is going to be enough to get us within range. We could use the Zigzagoon on something like the ADP to put it even closer, so that it's going to be a little bit easier for us to knock out, but I don't think we need to. I think we can probably just Marnie here.
Max damage does 220 damage exactly with the Hustle Belt, so I don't think that the Master Spiritomb is too relevant. I'd be happy to just leave the bench space open for something like or Oricorio if it's required, because as long as we only put one GX Pokemon down, I don't think it's going to be too big of an issue if our opponent Gust kills one.
Yeah, I think we're going to leave this Great Ball in our hand because we want to try and get into Oricorio or Dedenne next turn, if possible. So we'll just Anguish Cry here and do 190. And next turn we'll be able to take a knockout either with the Spiritomb or with the Buzzwole, depending on the situation. We want to use that Buzzwole on one of our opponent's Pokemon, if possible, preferably to take a knockout. But we're in a pretty good spot here, although it's going to be a bit of a race because our opponent obviously is going to be able to take a knockout this turn. They're going to take 2 prizes, so we're going to need to make sure that we take our 5 prizes before our opponent takes 6, which is easy enough to do. We only need to attack twice, whereas they need to attack 3 times, so we should be okay. But you never know,
yeah,
Pokemon.
The path to victory is in our grasp. We've got everything we need to pull it off. It's basically, I think, going to come down to, are we going to be able to find the gusting cards we need on the right turns? Because, or of course, instead of gusting, we might be able to knock out the Zacian instead. But that could be difficult to do because we would need a max damage Spiritomb, and you never know when your opponent's going to have something cheeky like a metal frying pan or a metal goggles to make it impossible. So then definitely the easiest way to go about that. If they do leave the ADP in the active as an easy knockout this turn, then it means we're not going to have to try and get back-to-back Gust, which could make be really good for us.
That is true, and it doesn't look like our opponent's doing a huge amount here. They're kind of just sitting back and waiting, so could be a case where they've actually missed energy. We saw them with the Cherish Ball before, but they didn't find Dedenne, so maybe they have one of those prized. Going for Quick Ball now, so if there is anything in the deck, then they're going to be grabbing it here. Zamazenta, that doesn't seem particularly useful. Maybe they're just looking to thin. Or maybe they're going to attack with Zamazenta.
Definitely looks like that's their goal. Zamazenta does actually have the effect of discarding special energy attached to the opponent's active Pokemon, but all of our Pokemon only need 1 energy to attack and probably get knocked out by the damage from that Zamazenta anyway, so definitely a bit interesting. I'm surprised that the opponent didn't attach to the ADP to guarantee they get a knockout because they did have an energy in that turn, but maybe... as I said before,
that was Metal Saucer, so they've still got an attachment potentially.
They discarded the energy and then used the Metal Saucer, is what I'm saying. They could have attached it to the ADP instead.
Yeah, that is true.
Discarding.
And it's also strange that they put the Zamazenta on the field too. I don't know why they played it when they could have just discarded it. I guess they get an ultimate ray to it, that seems fine. Alright, so we're in a position now where we are going to be able to get our knockout. We just need to make sure that we do it the right way. So I think it's going to be Buzzwole into ADP here. As much as I'd like to knock out the Dedenne with it, we need to make sure that we take these prizes when we can. And Buzzwole is a free knockout, so I'm more than happy to do that.
Yep, we've got the Buzzwole, the energy on it already, so that's an easy 3 prizes. We just need to make sure we take 2 prizes next turn. And what we can do here is we can just have 2 Spiritombs on the bench, powering both of them up at the same time. So even if our opponent were to gust kill one, we can try and make sure that both Spiritombs are threatening a knockout on the Dedenne-GX, or maybe even the Zacian next turn. So it's just going to come down to what we get off of Stellar Wish, and Bull Search might need to go for Dedenne-GX or Oricorio. Since our opponent's on 4 prizes, doesn't really matter if we put a GX down because they'll only be able to take 3 prizes at most from it.
Alright, so I'm just going to grab the Jirachi off of this Great Ball so that we can quick ball it away. We don't really need it anymore. I guess it just comes down to, do you want an Oricorio or Dedenne here?
I think I like Dedenne more.
I think I like Dedenne as well. It's not horrible. We can put this escape board down on the Jynx, so it doesn't matter. We don't need this Aurora energy. We can just discard it, and we'll draw a fresh hand and see what we get. We actually got the Gust for next turn, which is really good, and we also got the Hustle Belt. I think we put the Hustle Belt on this Spiritomb, especially since we have energy, so we can kind of hold out. If our opponent chooses to take the one with energy, then we just get the attachment and the building spite. I think we pretty much just hold on to this whole hand. I'm just going to Stellar Wish.
We haven't even used Stellar Wish yet.
I know, we've got so much stuff here. We've got Great Catcher as an opportunity. We can grab also.
So there's a few things here that we can do. We can get. I actually feel like getting the Hustle Belt here is the best thing to do.
Yeah, so do I.
Spiritombs, because what I hate about taking Great Catcher is it kind of forces our opponent to use Marnie, and we're already holding game.
Yeah.
Like if they don't use Marnie, we won anyway. So the Great Catcher doesn't actually do much for us here, except it means that if they do play Marnie, then it guarantees that Great Catcher will be on the bottom of the deck, which is where we don't want it to be. So taking the Hustle Belt, it's going to mean if they do end up gusting one of our Spiritombs, it's not really going to be. It's not going to be.
It's not going to be that big of a deal. I don't want to play the Hustle Belt down just because they're going to Tool. I know for a fact that they're going to randomly play Tool Scrapper and get rid of it. So it's either we play it down and then Lana's Fishing Rod to put the other one back in, or we hold it in our hand. I think we just hold it. We're in a pretty good spot. We can Sledgehammer for the knockout here, and we've got Gust and knockout next turn on the Dedenne. So as long as our opponent doesn't Marnie, which is unlikely considering we're going to have a massive hand here, but as long as they don't Marnie, we should be okay. We still have Jirachi, obviously.
You're 100% correct about holding the Hustle Belt, because we're currently in a position where if they don't Marnie us, then we win the game anyway. So, and the reason we were afraid of playing the Hustle Belt is because of cards like Tool Scrapper and Boss's Orders.
Yeah.
But if they Boss's Orders, then they aren't Marnieing, we win the game anyway.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'm sure there's things like Stamp, which could potentially come into play, but especially since they're playing cards like Autopad, it's pretty hard to fit all those cards in. So yeah, I feel like this game's looking pretty much wrapped up if our opponent doesn't get a really lucky Marnie off, and even if they do, we're going to be maybe like 1 card away from winning the game. It could be either an Energy or a Hustle Belt, depending on which Spiritomb we end up needing to attack with. Probably the Gust is going to be the hardest one to find, but once again, it's possibly actually realistic for us to knock out this Zamazenta in the active event. Has he got 220 HP or is it 230?
230, so it's a little bit more difficult. Yeah, so I think our end goal here is just it's going to be gusting Dedenne. It's going to be the way to go. They're actually getting their Jirachi powered up here. They're doing a whole bunch of random stuff, so I don't know what's going on here. Energy switching and all sorts. It could be that they're just playing cards to thin out their hand before they use something like Marnie. I don't know what's going on. There's the double energy switch.
Yeah, very interesting. And yeah, I guess our opponent's ready for this matchup because in hindsight now, having that Zamazenta in the active with 230 HP is actually pretty smart considering both Zamazenta and Zacian are able to take knockouts on pretty much every card in this deck. So Zamazenta almost seems just straight up better than Zacian in this situation. Assuming we keep our hand though, it's not going to matter thanks to that Dedenne-GX on the bench. And honestly, with this hand, we could probably even knock out the Zacian V on the bench, actually.
Yeah, we could probably get there. We've got enough damage and we've got enough resources that it shouldn't be too difficult, but...
We're actually holding it because of the Scoop Up Net. We can double Jynx plus the ability from Spiritomb to put 5 damage counters plus Hustle Belt, which would be enough to do 220 damage. So maybe Zigzagoon would be enough to close out the game. But nope, we don't see Marnie. We see a research. So
we're gonna
how do you want to win the game? Do we want to style on our opponent and get the knockout on the Zacian?
No. We play efficiently and politely. We do as few steps as possible. To be fair, I probably actually no, it doesn't matter because we would have needed to have done our attachment anyway. We can just boss and bring up the Dedenne. We're gonna win this one. We won a live game, Jordan. It happened.
We're not even playing when we say that. This is actually
first try. So hey, look at that. We managed to get ourselves a game with live commentary. Thank you very much to Jordan for coming along and recording that one with me. It's always good to have extra people floating around. And thanks to you for coming past and watching for us. So we always appreciate your viewership. It's always good fun. If you like the content, I'm feeling all flustered and awkward. If you like the content, then please consider subscribing. There's a button just about here that you can click to subscribe to the channel. Over here are some videos that YouTube thinks you'll like, as well as a playlist down the bottom for more of our Rebel Clash content. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. Like I said, we always appreciate it, and we'll see you next time for more from the Sableyes. Bye.